How have your flashbacks been this past week?
Somewhat diminished, honestly. I think it helped just having someone to talk to, but they still exist, and it's still as unpleasant as ever.
Alright. Well, it's good to hear that the frequency is less. Is the intensity of your visions any less? Or flashbacks any less?
Yes, my visions.
Yes, your clairvoyance.
No, it has not decreased in the slightest.
Alright. Have you had any other, important breakthroughs? Anything in your life related to things that you'd like to do? How's your motivation been?
Lacking is a good word for to describe my motivation.
Okay. I know we talked about a couple of goals that you had for yourself. Have you made any progress toward those at all? Or tried to?
Well, of course there's effort. Any reasonable progress is hampered by a number of unhealthy thoughts, I would imagine.
But from what I'm hearing, you've tried, but haven't had much success.
Yeah, whenever I sit down to work, it's hard to describe. It's like I'm trying to think, and my brain is filled with all these wibbly wobbly, brainy waney thoughts.
Okay. So, do you find yourself more distracted while trying to complete tasks, or do you find yourself more lost?
Well, I mean, I suppose I said last week I felt like I didn't know how to do things, but it's not that I don't know how. The steps really do come to me. It's just, I sit there and I look at for instance, if I'm writing a paper, I look at the computer screen and I think, I don't know, I just get tired, exhausted, and before I even start, I think of what to write, and I have to take a nap before I can finish a sentence. Does that make sense?
The way you say it, yes, it makes sense. It seems like you get exhausted from, smaller tasks that you don't feel you should get exhausted from.
Well, I mean, is it really any sort of sane to be exhausted before you write a sentence in a paper?
Sanity is an interesting question.
I feel like I run. I run from my problems. I run from my fears. And I've spent so long running, it's hard to find where to stop.
Do you find yourself in any situation, do you find yourself not running?
In any situation that I would not be running, I'm thinking. And when I think, I remember. And when I remember, I run.
Would you be comfortable taking me through one of your flashbacks?
I suppose in theory. As far as I know, there's nothing that can harm me in this office within reason. So, do I just start?
If you feel comfortable, start when you'd like and where you'd like.
Well, I suppose the images, they start when me and 5 others, including a diplomat of sorts, not exactly the most hardened of war fighters. We were in a city, and I forget what it was called, but it was once occupied by the French, and there was still some architectural and cultural lingerings of the occupation, and there was no support, no help, and it seemed like the people who wanted to kill us just wouldn't stop coming. At first it was just a single man in the street who saw us, and he shouted. Would you mind if we took a pause for a moment?
Yeah, that's fine.
Go.
Alright, sorry about that interruption.
That's alright, I asked for it.
That's true. Okay, so from what I remember, you were talking about being in a town that was once occupied by Frenchmen, and you were with 5 other people, including a diplomat.
Yes, and she was by far the most interesting of the group. Like I said, she wasn't exactly the most hardened combat veteran, but she knew her way around a gun, and if I weren't trained to be emotionless, I might say I had feelings, but of course I was trained. And, well, you see, after, like I said, it was one man in the street, and after that one man had been silenced, he was wielding a gun, you see, and more came, and about a dozen, but honestly, for the 5 of us, a dozen armed civilians are like so many mice, which is terrifying in and of itself. But after that, there was more concerted effort. Then they knew where we were. The sounds of gunfire had started, and it seemed as though we wouldn't be able to get out. Like I said, there wasn't support. It was an hour away. But lucky for me, my government doesn't just abandon anyone who happens to be an hour away. So we found ourselves a nice little hold-up, and they were able to have a plane fly over, not with troops, but with equipment, and we were able to secure enough of an area to strap on some body armor and set up some turrets with motion trackers. And I don't know if you've ever seen those, but they're a terrifying sight to behold. Just being on the proper end of one is scary, much less the other end.
I can imagine.
But well, of course, trading feelings and all that, no fear whatsoever. And we, we lasted the night, and we lost one of the men in the squad. But funny enough, the diplomat of all people, the diplomat was the more cunning of us, and we were trained in strategy and positioning, but she was trained in diplomacy, and I must say, I remember her red hair to today. Piercing green eyes, really. She was kind and calm throughout the entire night. We all stayed awake. We were able to hide, and it didn't stop the gunfire, of course, shooting in any random direction. Of course, the civilians in the crossfire were just collateral damage for the other side. It's I'd say that has to be one of the most distressing parts, is that the people you're fighting to protect support most often the ones that are most willing to let them die. But of course, what sticks in your mind more, a stray bullet coming through a wall, or unmanned drone flying overhead and firing a machine gun at your family? So, I suppose it's understandable. In a way.
Alright. So, you and 3 other soldiers and the diplomat made it through the first night.
Yes.
What happened to the hour-away reinforcements?
Well, they got held up, you see. There was a bombing up at the capital. Not of our country, but of the one we were in. And the help that was coming to us was diverted there. There were several attacks all across the country, actually. Some men who had identification as a national police force, well, happened to be fake identification, made it through the checkpoints to the royal palace, and with trucks full of explosives rather than whatever they were supposed to be filled with. So, bravo there for whoever was running the gate. It was really gruesome, rather. It was the morning that was when hell started to open up. Both the troops from our side coming to pick us up and the firefight they brought with them was more intense than the day before altogether. Of course, there was no way that we could both combat effectively and protect civilians. The diplomat, like I said, she took care of herself, but that day proved to be her undoing, and I still have a scar from where I was hit with a bullet, and that night she bound it, knowing all of the proper medical procedures that we've all been trained in, but honestly we didn't expect her to be so good at it, and that's probably what makes it so emotionally jarring, is she was really an expert at making herself well liked, and I think we all fell into that a little bit. We all cared for her more than we did for each other, I think. Despite having been fighting side by side, we were trained really not to care as much, because if your friend falls in combat, are you better fighting the firefight, or are you better running out of your cover to try to save him? What do you think the answer is?
So, you said she fell out, it was her undoing on the second day.
Oh, yes. There was another one of our team who got caught moving between an alley and shot in the hip. The bullet shattered his bone. He couldn't walk, could barely move. The rest of us knew not to get him. It was a trap, obviously. But before we could even say anything, before we could even react, she had already dove out of the alley to try to save him, and she did. He's still alive today, and it's because of her, but she was shot in the stomach in the process, and I'm not sure if you know, but being shot in the stomach is, it won't kill you right away, but you will bleed, and you will bleed for hours, and it will not be pleasant.
Is that the most vivid part of your flashbacks?
Yes. That, those few hours with her were the most trying, I would say, and that is what most impressively remains in my memory.
You did mention emotionlessness being something that you were trained, and that being one of the few times that it was actually tried.
Absolutely. Most of my colleagues they've been clinically diagnosed as sociopaths, you see, and it's not really a diagnosis, more of a consequence of training, in my opinion.
Understandable.
I appreciate you letting me get that out. I don't know if I feel better, but I feel more honest.
Oh, perhaps another day we'll finish the story, though I don't know if that would be beneficial for you or not.
Maybe someday.
All right. Well, I'd like you to continue sort of tracking the frequency and duration and intensity of your flashbacks, and we will meet again next week. If that's if that works for you.
Yes, sir.
All right. I will see you next week.
Thank you very much, Doctor.
Thanks again.